Fellow Earthlings, fellow people of Michigan. Uh, this is going to be directly pointed to Chris, the supervisor with the Michigan Public Service Commission. Chris, you had told me that I am not able to speak. Well, thank God I haven't a Tourette syndrome nor a speech impediment anymore, so I'm going to make sure to take full advantage of that. So, as of last year, the top recipient of DTE donations was Governor Gretchen Whitmer at more than $235,000, which were made throughout her career in public office. Arbik Nesbitt, the top Republican in the Senate, took in just under another $70,000, while Jim Aniak, who led the Senate Democrats, took in almost the same. This is according to the Energy and Policy Institute. Amid controversies, DTE Energy continues to spend big money in Michigan, and nearly every lawmaker accepts. 93% of legislatures have taken DTE Energy money during their careers. Key points of this. Key points are nearly every member in the Michigan legislature has accepted DTE Energy money. Environmental justice coalitions, consumer groups, and clean energy advocates are growing frustrated with DTE Energy's utility service, political advocacy, and high rates. Lawmakers and regulators are under scrutiny for their unwillingness to advocate certain policies aimed at helping consumers. Michigan lawmakers facing mounting pressure to rein in DTE Energy lambasted the utility for days-long power outages in August and urged regulators to strike down its 8.8% electric rate increase request. But campaign finance records reveal DTE's tight grip on state officials, who have taken $1.26 million combined from utility-affiliated donors over the course of their political careers. Of Michigan's 148 state senators and 138 representatives, almost all of them have logged campaign contributions from DTE Political Action Committee, PAC. Its executives and lobbyists, or both Governor Gretchen Whitmer leads all state elected officials with $235,900 in donations tied to DTE, dating back to her time as a state legislature in the early 2000s. The company has bet big on Whitmer in her time as governor, even raising money for her. Most recently, Whitmer accepted $39,450 from DTE executives in mid-July, giving Blitz. Whitmer is up for her re-election this November, when all state houses and the Senate seats will also be on the ballot. DTE, along with other monopoly utilities in the state, is overseen by regulators appointed to the Michigan Public Service Commission by the governor. If Whitmer wins, she will have an opportunity to reappoint two of the three regulators she appointed during her first term, or select new members altogether. State legislatures also has enormous impact on DTE's business, setting the statutory framework in which the utility and its regulators operate. In addition, state lawmakers can use their positions to investigate issues like chronic power outages, an increasingly popular idea among advocacy organizations. But in Michigan, the path to legislative action runs through the wall with DTE cash. We can basically regulate the utilities. We can't basically regulate the utilities because they're the ones regulating us, the lawmakers. State Rep. Yusuf Robbie, a Democrat, said earlier this year. Robbie has called for the prohibition on regulated utilities contributing to state officials, and has pushed to a suit of bills that require utilities to provide hourly bill credits during outages, improve transparency of power outages, and expand opportunities for the public to weigh in on utility planning. Rep. Abram Ayash, a Democrat, is pursuing the legislative package alongside Robbie. The two representatives, along with 8 of their colleagues, have not accepted DTE-linked campaign money. Ayash has also criticized DTE and its political machine. DTE makes millions on Wall Street, but does not invest it back into the grid. Michigan's private utility company care more about profit and political power than they do about keeping the actual power on. Aish tweeted in late August when hundreds of thousands of DTE customers lost their power after a storm. For many of them, the lights stayed out for days. Earlier this year, when he and Rabi proposed legislation requiring utilities like DTE to compensate customers for those kinds of outages. Ayash said he hoped the legislative colleagues would look more at their residents and less at the coffers of DTE and consumers' energy. Legislative leaders are the biggest beneficiaries of DTE donations. In the legislature, DTE has funneled the most money to the House and Senate leaders who have wide latitude to set legislative agenda, and Senator Eric Nesbitt, the Republican who presides over the Senate as president pro tempore, has raked in more than $69,500 from DTE affiliated donors during his campaign. As his chamber's leader, Nesbitt decides which legislatures serve on which committees, a key consideration for utilities whose business is modeled by state law in many ways. Senator Kim Horn, a Republican who previously chaired the House Energy and Technology Committee, is currently vice chair of the State Energy and Technology Committee, has taken $53,250 from DTE affiliated donors. During his time in office, the Senate Energy Committee's current chair, Republican Dan Lowers, has received another $25,400 from DTE affiliated donors. These committees cover energy and utility issues, and their leaders have discretion over which bills can get hearings and ultimately advance to a vote. If committee chairs do not allow a hearing on a bill, there is no opportunity for legislatures to take action on it. That is a familiar frustration for clean energy and consumers advocates who have frequently been at odds with energy committee leaders. DTE continues to fight bills that would remove Michigan's arbitrary cap on distributed solar. In addition, the utility has consistently opposed proposals for more ambitious renewable energy standard in Michigan, even though such measures are major drivers of renewable energy expansion. Speaker of the House, Jason Wentworth, a Republican, is among DTE's top beneficiaries in his chamber with $46,950 in DTE tied donations. Like Nesbitt, he sets committee rosters and chose Rep. Joe Bellino, a DTE darling, to return as chair of the influential House Energy Policy Committee. Bellino has logged $36,820 in DTE-linked contributions over his career, and the utility has even paid for him to play golf with professionals at the PGA tournament. In past sessions, Bellino has aligned with DTE in refusing to allow his committee to vote on legislation that would have lifted the cap on distributed generation. Other notable legislatures have taken or have raked in significant campaign money from DTE donors, including Minority Leader Jim Antioch, a Democrat who is behind only Nesbitt with $67,950 in related contributions. Nearly every member of the Senate leadership from both parties has taken DTE-connected campaign contributions for a total of $291,940, all except one Democrat, Senator Rosemary Byer, who received thousands of dollars, and in many cases, tens of thousands of dollars. Bayer returned the single $250 donation she received from DTE's PAC in 2019 and hasn't logged another DTE contribution. House leadership members have also accepted money from utility-linked donors, adding up to $111,800. Rabi also has forcefully criticized DTE in his time as Democratic floor leader stands apart from his colleagues. He returned $400 in total donations DTE's PAC made to his campaign in 2017 and 2019 and hasn't received another DTE related contributions. I've been in office for 6 years now. I have introduced dozens of bills to try to expand solar energy in Michigan, stop climate change, expand our renewable energy portfolio, and every single one of those bills has been blocked. Not by magic, not by some existential alien force coming in. It's DTE. Rabi testified in the recent public hearing on DTE's proposed rate hike. It's DTE. It's Consumers Energy. It's their lobbyists on the tiles of the hallway calling legislatures up, telling them they have to take their names off my bills. The DTE under fire for major rate hike precedent or persistent outages. 2 summers in a row, DTE customers have suffered lengthy outages that risk their health and safety. Data show Michiganders pay the highest rates in the Midwest region, but their utility services is among the most unreliable. After widespread outages plagued DTE customers in the summer of 2021, lawmakers bowed to public pressure to investigate the problem. In weeks after the House committee held hearings on a matter of 11 of 16 committee members received campaign contributions from the utility affiliated PACs. According to the Detroit News analysis, DTE's PACs gave 6 of those legislatures $1,000 apiece 5 days before one of its executives appeared before the body. DTE couldn't do this if our communities, if the regulators or the elected officials didn't let them. O.T. Gorey, and a DTE customer of the and member of the social justice group Emergent Justice, said in April, public anger with DTE escalated to new heights in August when the Michigan Public Service Commission, the state's utility regulator, held a first of its kind public hearing on DTE's request to raise heights by 8.8%. Community members jammed the hearing room, and commissioners had to cut off spoken testimony after it ran well over the allotted 2 hours. All but a handful of speakers voiced opposition to the rate hike. Several dozen DTE customers have also filled written comments, almost all deriding the proposed rate hike or rate increase. Several elected officials testified to the public hearing, including U.S. Representative Rashida Tlaib, who represents the Detroit area that houses DTE customers most besieged by power outages in low-income communities already struggling with their utility bills. What does DTE do when it's not shutting people off or failing to fix outages? They're jacking up your rates. Since 2015, DTE rate increases have increased $774 million, the second highest increase of any investor-owned utility in the country. The Congresswoman wrote in a Twitter thread and devoted with spoken remarks. DTE Energy is one of the most expensive and unreliable utility companies in the nation. They need accountability, not another rate hike that puts the lives of millions in danger. The thread continued. Tlaib also noted that DTE's prolific political giving has reached almost all Michigan House and Senate members, calling it disgusting. Michigan regulators will decide on DTE's rate increase in November. The proceeding has brought unfamiliar visibility to the Michigan Public Service Commission, whose ordinarily low-profile work rarely draws a spirited audience. But as frustration grows with chronic outages, lagging infrastructure updates, and rising bills in DTE territory, the regulatory body is under pressure to prioritize the captive customers bound to DTE. While Michigan Public Service Commission members have been supportive to expand public engagement in DTE's rate case, some Michigan advocates are skeptical about how far the Michigan Public Service Commission is willing to go to hold utilities accountable more broadly. Aside from the rate case, groups like the Michigan Citizens Utility Board negotiated for nearly 2 years after a $2 per hour outage credit and bigger payouts for customers who face longer, more destructive services interruptions. CUB has also called for stricter rules that disallow utilities like DTE from later recovering those expenses from their customers, in an approach similar to the legislation proposed by Rabi and Ayash. But in issuing its order earlier this year, the Michigan Public Service Commission tilted toward the status quo. Regulators increased a flat rate credit to $35 per day for customers who experience prolonged outages under certain conditions, while leaving other issues murkier. The Michigan Public Service Commission seems to dismiss, without even respectful consideration, arguments put forth by intervening groups like the CUB that are trying to represent the public, especially when those arguments collide with the financial interests of utilities. CUB wrote in its rundown of the decision, DTE regularly tells its shareholders that it is operating in a highly constructive regulatory environment. DTE political contributions undermine racial equity, climate justice. DTE's critics say that the company's political influences contrasts with DTE's public-facing commitments to advocate racial equity in testimony filled with the Michigan Public Service Commission in its rate case. Investor Jackson Coppell, former executive director of the nonprofit Solidarity, noted DTE support for politicians pushing bills that would erode voting rights of Michiganders in predominantly black communities and other communities of color. Attacks on the democratic processes in Michigan sparked a campaign led by the defended Black Voters Coalition. The coalition has called for corporations, including DTE, to halt campaign contributions to dozens of Republican state lawmakers who support voter suppression legislation. Well, these companies are happy to spew empty words to make them sound like they're for the people. It's far more important to them to put politicians in office that will put corporations over people and keep the rich rich. Ken Whitaker, executive director of Michigan People's Campaign, said earlier this year, "The people and they don't take care. They don't take care what it takes. They don't take care what it takes, even if it means sacrificing the freedom to vote for our community as working families were fighting back." A report on utility redlining published in August by We the People Solidarity and Michigan Environmental Justice Coalition showed that DTE has long delayed basic infrastructure improvements in low-income communities and communities of color, where system capable is commonly more than 2 decades past its useful life. The consequences of the utilities' inaction continue to play out in real time as those communities grapple with persistent outages and increased vulnerability to extreme weather events fueled by climate change. DTE's political funding dovetails neatly with DTE's disinvestment of BIPOC communities, making it harder for those affected by DTE to respond, Coppell wrote in a DTE rate case. DTE also using dark money to influence Michigan politics. Beyond making direct contributions to lawmakers' campaign funds, DTE uses dark money groups and its foundation to reward politicians and community leaders for supporting its agenda. For example, Michigan Energy First, A front group run by several DTE executives has invested heavily in state politics. In 2019 alone, the Detroit News found that the group gave $650,000 to a fund tied to the Michigan Republican Party, $250,000 to a fund connected to the Michigan Democratic Party, and $100,000 to a fund that had supported Whitmer. It gave another $20,000 to an organization affiliated with the wife of Wentworth, the House Speaker, according to the Detroit News report. Another DTE connected front group, Protect Our Values, emerged this year under the name. DTE ramped up its support for Bellino by creating a website to praise him ahead of the Republican primary. Bellino edged out his challenger in the August election to secure his place on the ballot. And potentially this continued committee leadership in November, DTE has also used its dark money groups to spread misleading information on pro-solar legislation. DTE pursues safe, reliable, clean, and cost-effective electric service only to the extent that regulation and popular or political pressure would otherwise limit its pursuit of maximum profits, Coppell wrote in a recent DTE rate case testimony. And DTE seeks to limit the degree to which regulation and popular or political pressure can force it to prioritize the public interests over its own profits. Methodology. For the analysis, the Energy and Policy Institute reviewed campaign finances records filed from January 2006 through August 2022. This time scope is designed to cover the legislative careers of state lawmakers who are bound by term limits that allow them to serve a maximum of 2 4-year terms for a total of 8 years in the Senate and 3 2-year terms for a total of 6 years in the House. This analysis included an additional 5 years of review for Whitmer, who served in the state legislature before she was elected governor. Contributions returned by candidates were removed from totals. DTE PAC contributions made from January 2016 through August 2022 are available here. Campaign contributions made by DTE employees are listed in a spreadsheet provided by the Michigan Secretary of State's office. The Energy and Policy Institute pulled from this data all contributions by donors who identified as employees of entities whose names include Detroit Edison and DTE between January 2006 and August 2022. Removed from giving totals were contributions from DTE employees whose titles do not suggest they are executives or lobbyists. The analysis examined contributions dating back to 2001 for Whitmer. Update March 2nd, 2023. The Energy and Policy Institute has updated its data showing DTE linked contributions after Michigan's November 2020 election, which prompted significant turnover in the Michigan House and Senate. The latest data reflects contributions made by DTE's PAC as well as its executives and lobbyists to current Michigan legislatures and 3 statewide office holders: Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Attorney Dana Nessel, and Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. It removes lawmakers who served last term but there are no longer in office, either because they did not run or they lost their re-election bids in November. This update draws from the same required state campaign finance disclosures that informed the original analysis outlined in the methodology section. It includes contributions made through the end of the most current information available. And I'm not going to go through all that, but one last point that I'm going to make is right here. DTE Energy has come under fire in Ann Arbor this year after numerous long-term outages, has asked for more than $622 million in rate increase, nearly double the $324 million it actually needs, according to a filing submitted to the Michigan Public Service Commission on Tuesday, August 15th. by Nestle's office, also someone that took money from them. So I guess to sum it up, Chris, the supervisor with the Michigan Public Service Commission, no, I'm not going to be quiet. I'm not going to quit speaking. I'm going to keep speaking. And I hope you have a great day, you as well as Dan Scripps.